Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we were playing once again as Brettonia against the forces of the Dawi on the map Ashenhall. And much in the same vein as the game against the Greenskins, we're doing something a little ridiculous here and bringing a mass shooting army against the Dwarves. So, usually when I do this matchup, I try to bring Royal Hippogriffs, Questing Knights, Knights Errant, that sort of thing, trying to break the Dwarves with a more traditional cavalry-focused playstyle with Brettonia. But I kind of got the idea that maybe the Dwarves do tend to bring a lot of cheap trash troops to try to sort of zone you out. They tend to bring a lot of unshielded great weapon troops, especially Longbeards, because they do okay against cavalry. You almost always see Slayers. Once again, Slayers will do rather well against cavalry. I figured, you know what, we might actually have ourselves a situation where mass archers against the standard or more normal Dwarven build will do rather well. And of course you can't have a few, you've got to have a lot. So let's kind of break this build down, top down, and see what we've got here. First and foremost, we do have King Louis. Louis is great, I think, in this matchup, and honestly most matchups. He can give you a map-wide frenzy if his HP drops low enough. He does have the Ladies Champion, which gives him regen until he breaks. He does have Foe Seeker, Stand Your Ground, Lion's Shield, as well as the Sword of Couronne. And these are all great buffs and debuffs, really make Lewin a pretty nasty assassin-type lord, and also pretty good at just supporting a blob of troops. Alongside him, we do have a Damsel of Life who does have Earthblood and Regrowth. To be honest, the Regrowth probably a bit wasted. We've probably been better off here with Flesh to Stone, since this army has almost no expensive units. I think besides Lewin, the most expensive thing here I think is the Trebuchets, which are like under 900 gold cost with their chevrons. So dirt cheap stuff. So really the Regrowth was kind of pointless, I think. Life Bloom in there as well, and a Power Stone to give us more Winds of Magic. Our front line is just a horde of foot squires. These guys, of course, will trade pretty well against lower-end to mid-tier Dwarven infantry, like Longbeards and below. And then we do have a whole bunch of peasant bows. It's a mix of normal peasant bowmen, some peasant bow with fire arrows, and then some peasant bows with fox. They're shooting foxes, guys, but with shooting pox arrows, because pox arrows will do well if we get into an archery duel or a shooting duel. While that's not really what Brettonian peasant bows are meant to do, the pox arrows will give us a better chance because they're going to be debuffing my opponent's damage output. Finally, we do have two field trebuchets chevroned up to veterancy rank 7, which does mean they're going to be fairly precise. And if my opponent blobs up or he clumps up and he makes a mistake like that, we are going to be able to punish him pretty greatly. For my opponent, though, he has gone with a pretty defensive box formation with a whole bunch of Slayers. No Giant Slayers. Honestly, you don't really need them against Brettonia. Brettonia doesn't have the most heavily armored cavalry, and Giant Slayers are also honestly kind of expensive anyway, so not a bad choice there. For his Lord, he has a Rune Lord in here somewhere. There we go. The Rune Lord is fully kitted out with all of his Runes of Wrath and Ruin, Rune of Oath and Steel, Rune of Master of Negation. He's got Rune of Hearth and Home, and Forge Fire, which I think is unnecessary. You probably don't want to bring that, but regardless, pretty potent pick there. For his shooting, he does have a mix of Quarrelers as well as Thunderers, so a really nice situation where you can either focus your opponent with lots of AP or zone away more lightly armored skirmishers with your Quarrelers. Goblobber, as well as a Grudge Thrower, basically good for breaking up infantry formations, and honestly they'll do okay against cavalry as well. And then a whole bunch of Dwarf Warriors here in the front line. Supporting them, of course, the Slayers. The Grumbling Guard here in the back is in tight little box formation, and that is basically it. It's basically a horde of Slayers, no Dragonback Slayers in fact, and then some Thunderers and Catapults and that sort of thing. Regardless, over here my opponent did have some miners, which I forgot to mention. He has the Equine miners as well as normal miners camped out in the woods, who do get a nice little jump out here on my foot squires. We do counter-attack there with Lewin, who's going to break them up. The foot squires will get in, and they're going to mince through these miners in short order. Unfortunately, over here the field trebuchets are getting pounded by the catapults, so I'm going to be forced to pull forward. I can't really afford an artillery duel, especially not against the Goblobber, because it will rout the crew pretty quickly. Brettonian artillery crews do not have the best leadership, but because my opponent is using his artillery to counter battery my artillery, it means my infantry is able to push forward unmolested. Unfortunately, though, this trebuchet is really starting to take a pounding. Louis does manage to kind of snap and break the miners here, but yeah, things are not going great everywhere. Over here, the Foot Squires are going to dive into the Dwarf Warriors, which is going to be a pretty quick fight in favor of the Foot Squires. They do have 70 armor. They do have 25 melee attack with 9 bonus versus infantry. They're going to be hitting these guys like a ton of bricks, and Dwarf Warriors are not going to hold out too long. That said, my opponent does successfully rout off the artillery crew here, forcing them to flee into the woods. Not at the end of the world there, but definitely not what we wanted. The Thunderers, in the meantime, over here have taken quite a pounding from the artillery and are now being focused by volley fire from the archers. And pox arrows, fire arrows, all of that raining in, doing quite a bit of work. You might be wondering why I bring fire arrows against the Dwarves, because they are listed as being weak against armor. If you do the math on it, Fire arrows actually out-damage normal arrows and pox arrows against armor right up until the 100 armor mark. And they'll do way better against things like Slayers. So in my opinion, they're basically worth it unless you're really lacking points somewhere. They are generally going to get at least decent value. In the meantime, the Thunderers here, they do get into position, but they are being pounded pretty heavily by that mass archery fire. And in the front line, the Foot Squires are slowly but surely chewing their way through those Dwarf Warriors who just cannot hold up. Elsewhere, you can see the archers here focusing very heavily on the slayers. Over here, though, my opponent doing a much better job of forcing off my own archers. He does have a Goblobber in there, so the leadership is being nuked. But we do dive in with King Louis, and we are going to start breaking these guys off. And this is the one weakness where slayers, they're going to struggle. When there's an artillery piece, we are fighting in amongst the enemy artillery pieces, so my opponent is struggling to get a full surround. The Grumbling Guard's honestly getting in the way here, and my opponent isn't really able to get a full sort of encirclement on Lewin. And we do pop stand your ground, so he's going to be able to tank here pretty well. And we are breaking the Goblobber and forcing it from the field, which is a big win for us. In the meantime, this front line is breached, and in come the Foot Squires pouring through, looking to dumpster my opponent's troops. You can see the Dwarf Warriors in full retreat, and over here the Damsel of Life, alongside the Foot Squires, finally mincing through these annoying Equine Miners and getting them clear. In the meantime, over here, the Field Trebuchet is doing pretty poorly, if I do say so. It's continuously obstructed. I really should have probably tried to maneuver it to here, but what can you do? In the front line, in the meantime, it is a bit of a grinding battle. The Dwarf Warriors and Slayers are actually breaking through the Foot Squires, who just don't have that much leadership, and we are actually going to pull back here with our Peasant Bows to avoid getting completely crumped. Fortunately, though, our Trebuchet is coming back online. We are going to be able to pull the crew back on here. We do still have 2 artillery pieces left intact, and with 15 crewmen, it's more than enough to keep things running. In the meantime, our archers, some of them did get routed off, but they are continuously coming back, and now we are able to start pouring fire into the Slayers and the Grudge Thrower over here, taking the artillery offline, as King Louis here pops his buffs and promptly runs away. And this Master of Ruin here is being a bit wasted, trying to shut him down. Foot Squires over here, shutting down the Quarrelers, doing a great job of it. Foot Squires, honestly, if it's a unit that doesn't have the best melee defense, Foot Squires will do amazing work, just because they've got so much damage output. The Grudge Thrower over here is still pounding away, but struggling. It is getting focused down pretty heavily by all that archery fire. You can see the crew there, obviously with only 40 armor, they're really not meant to hold up against this firepower of that magnitude. While over here, the Slayers, although they are trying pretty hard, are going to start losing to these Foot Squires, so I do believe they might actually break these guys. You can see the Foot Squires' leadership, of course, not the greatest. They are still Brettonian infantry, so that's generally not a positive. They are doing their very best here. They are trying. They've got 14 models to the Slayers' 9. They do out HP the Slayers by quite a lot, but their stats are very bad. And of course, as they start losing armor with tiredness, they're going to be doing worse. That said, the Archers able to sort of pound these Thunders, continuously pressuring my opponent's backline, and the Foot Squire wave just keeps rolling through, penetrating ever deeper into my opponent's formations. And where my opponent starts blobbing up, King Louis here forcing the blob of the Grumbling Guard, forcing a blob with the Thunders. My opponent is definitely starting to struggle a little bit. And over here, he is pursuing with the Dwarf Warriors, but the Dwarf Warriors cannot chase down Archers. They were too fast. And these guys still do have a lot of ammo, so if my opponent isn't able to shut them down, they will still do a lot of damage, armor or no armor. And this is one of those situations, much like when I do mass handgun builds against Dwarves, where Dwarves simply cannot catch you. If you remove units like Slayers from the field, the Dwarves' artillery is not going to do enough damage, really, to cleave through all these troops. And the Dwarf infantry is not going to be able to catch me, so I can just kite. In the worst case, I just do my pro-marine splits like you would in StarCraft, split apart your Peasant Bows, or basically Marines, and shoot your opponent to death. The Slayer over here, Lone Slayer, sitting amidst a pile of his fallen kin, being all sad. Elsewhere in the meantime, these Foot Squires do get wrapped up alongside those Quarrelers, but once again, my opponent is forced to expose the flank here. The Goblobber does reman the guns, but once again, now there's a new pocket of Foot Squires pouring in from the flank, coming in to shut those troops down. And although my opponent did actually manage to breach this flank over here with some Dwarf Warriors as well as the Slayers, we are going to be able to turn around, stop them from pursuing. The Foot Squires are diving in on the back of these Dwarf Warriors, and you can see still a reasonably healthy unit of Foot Squires. We do still have our Damsel of Life here slaying out with some Miners, and we're just going to tie down these annoying Slayers and be done with them. You can see the Foot Squires there do get hit by an Earthblood. They are going to be able to pursue these Dwarf Warriors away, and in a bit of an inefficient use of ammo there, we are going to be able to remove these Slayers from play, get rid of the last one model there who's being a ridiculous pain in the posterior. He's going to get cut down here ASAP by the annoying by the very annoyed Foot Squires there. And he actually cuts down 2 Peasant Bowmen, which I didn't realize in the game. It's kind of funny, actually. He's actually juking here, doing quite a lot of work, but finally he's going to be put down where he belongs. And with that, my opponent at this point is kind of just creating a bastion, a sort of Helm's Deep here. Lewin did manage to extricate himself, take off, and starts shattering these Dwarf Warriors, forcing them from the field, which then allows me to regroup my Foot Squires, start regrouping my Archers, and we still have a lot of ammo on Field Trebs. And you can see the Field Trebs just pouring fire into the Grumbling Guard here, and they are starting to add up some damage. And honestly, these guys did kind of let me down this game. They didn't really do too great, but, you know, they're doing some work. The Slayers, in the meantime, are going to get pounded by the Archers. My opponent probably should have pulled them back because the Archers this is an ideal target for the Archers. Shields or no shields, they're not going to hold up well. The Trebs, though, starting to work the Grumbling Guard over. When I say work him over, it's kind of slow and tedious work. It's not really happening very quickly. The Trebs are kind of unreliable, to put it kindly. Certainly, we are starting to run a little low on ammo on some of our peasant bows. Not all of these guys were in good shape, ammo-wise at this point, but we do still have this pocket over here and very high ammo count. Our Foot Squires are pushing back into the middle. You can see the Slayers here just being torn apart. My opponent does pop a Master of Oath and Steel to try to protect these guys from that archery fire, but really, we're not relying on our non-AP damage here. We're more relying on our little amounts of AP to overwhelm these Thunderers, and in the meantime, the Foot Squires are coming in. King Louis has ditched his chase of these Dwarf Warriors over there to come back in. And my opponent is at this point just reduced to the last sort of smidgens of troops. This Grudge Thrower over here still holding strong, but in comes the Damsel and these Foot Squires. The Goblob are completely pressured out of position. The Quarrel has actually run out of ammo at this point. There's just too many peasants. And at this point, it's just a case of destroying these last two Grumbling Guard and some of these Quarrelers, which my opponent simply has no way of dealing with this. Lewin still has a long way to go, and my opponent does GG out. So, well played to my opponent, and it was a pretty fun game. It was interesting to try out something that's unconventional and a bit ridiculous, and make it work. One of the things with the... One of the cool things with peasant bows is that they can do. You can bring a lot of them. They're dirt cheap. It's 400 gold for a basic peasant bow. It's 450 for a upgraded one with fire or poison with pox. Which, if we compare that to like Empire crossbows, they cost 475, and you basically get the same or almost the same performance that you would from a peasant bowman against masses of troops. You're not really looking to snipe dwarf lords, so you don't need the accuracy. You just need the volume. And it's much easier to generate volume as a Brettonia. The Trebuchets kind of let me down, but in the long run, these guys did rake in about 46 kills, and against some valuable targets. The Grumbling Guard, Thunders, those sorts of units. It is important to keep in mind that the Trebs were not particularly expensive. A 7-chevron Trebuchet is something like 800 or 900, not even 900 gold. Because the cost going down to 650 means the unit is really pretty cheap. If we actually quickly look here at the unit's exact cost, if I can find Brettonia. So 7 chevron Trebs were 859. So a reasonably cheap unit. They're able to just deliver a decent amount of damage over time. You did see they got like 22 and 46 kills. They played a bit of a distraction Carnifex role, forcing my opponent's artillery to focus on the Trebs instead of focusing on more valuable targets, such as my Archers, which they could have broken much more easily, honestly. Foot Squires, which were a valuable unit. Like, all of my units, I think, performed useful functions. And so I think my opponent focused kind of the wrong units there. He did have a lot of cheap troops himself, so he didn't have to worry that much about the Trebuchet's effect, I think. But regardless, I think it was a fun build. Not necessarily what I would recommend again if you're, once again, looking to be competitive. If you're looking to be super try-hard, I probably wouldn't recommend Mass Infantry. But it's a fun build. It's something that's viable, I think, against most Dwarf builds. Obviously, if your opponent did like All Slayer, you'd probably be screwed. But then again, if you do like a mixed Cav and Infantry build as Brettonia and your opponent goes full Slayer, you're probably screwed anyway. So it's one of those things where it's a fun build and it can work. If your opponent goes a little more elite on Infantry, if they, for example, bring more longbows with great weapons or whatever, you're probably going to get more value out of your Archers than you do in this sort of scenario. They're mostly Dwarf Warriors and Quarrelers and Thunders and that sort of thing. But still a lot of fun. A lot of those Archers did rack up quite a few kills over the course of that game. Louis, of course, incredibly useful. Lore of Life caster, I did misplay a bit. Honestly, I probably could have not bothered with the Lore of Life and gone with something else. I probably could have gone with either Lore of Heavens or Lore of beasts, perhaps even gotten Amber Spear, to be honest, because Earthblood on Peasant, in retrospect, or the Earthblood was just kind of useless, and Lewin has his own regen, and Dwarves usually won't rout your Lord, so he's probably going to maintain the regen for the whole game. But oh well, hindsight's 20/20. That was a bit of a misplay on my part, but what can you do? For my opponent's build, I would my main critique would just be the lack of cannons. I think I do understand the use of the. I do think Gobblobber is not a bad choice, but I don't think you need multiple artillery pieces of that sort. And otherwise, I would probably try to go more Thunders, fewer Quarrelers. You don't really need the Quarrelers, in my opinion. And perhaps try to go with Longbeards with great weapons. Ditch the miners. Just go with Longbeards with great weapons, and try to. Those will do pretty well. They'll hold up well against Foot Squires, and they'll really do some damage to Cav if Cav tries to get in on them. But regardless, that's my 2 cents there on the matter. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, don't hesitate to post them. I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.